Join the conversation with Tommy Weber. Pro and college baseball coach Tommy Weber brings you cutting-edge interviews and thought-provoking commentary in a weekly podcast dedicated to baseball, sports, current events, and the world. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and TommyWeberBaseball.com. And make sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Tommy Weber Baseball. It's time to get the conversation started, so here's your host, Tommy Weber.
From the Bolt Studio on the Staten Island campus of St. John's University, this is The Conversation. I'm Tommy Weber, brought to you by our crack St. John's undergraduate sport management staff. Very enthusiastic today. Well done. We're going to give you some perspective and lots of opinions on baseball, culture, and just about anything else that comes up. Joe Thon is my guest. Joe is a former fifth-round pick of the Toronto Blue Jays. Interesting that Joe went to high school in Puerto Rico. I had the pleasure of watching Joe's father, Dickie Thon, in his major league career. Outstanding major league player whose career was cut short by really bad injury, which we might get into later. But terrific player, really played the game the right way. So Joe comes with a great pedigree. He's also just finished his first season as a manager in the Houston Astros organization at Fayetteville, which is their A club, the world champion Houston Astros, just in case you were living under a rock for a long time. Joe Thon, welcome.
Hi, Tommy. Thank you for having me, man.
You bet. So start us off with just a brief kind of synopsis of what your first year as a manager was like, given that ostensibly you had coached in college a little bit at the University of Houston, and then really got thrown right into the fire with Fayetteville. What was it like for you this season?
You know what? It was a great experience. I was very lucky to have a lot of managers from the past that I was able to emulate and kind of copy. Because to be quite honest with you, like if I never managed before, I never really been in a position like that before. So I had to revert back to the people that I looked up to and what they did, how they responded, how they dealt with people. I wouldn't lie to you if I had a little bit of imposter syndrome at first. It was just one of those things. It's just like I just didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I had to act like I knew what I'm doing, but I didn't know what I was doing.
Half the battle, my friend.
Right, but no, I had a lot of like great managers of the past that I was able to emulate and still talk to kind of pick their brain of what to do, what not to do. It was good.
Give me some names. Who were those guys that helped you when you first found out that you were going to be managing a team that you leaned on for some advice?
The first person I really called was Eduardo Perez. He was one of my managers in winter ball. He's a commentator with ESPN. Joe Madden was my dad's first roommates, so they're very close, and he was very, very helpful. Edwin Rodriguez, Puerto Rico's first major league manager, was he's like a grandfather to me, and he's very, very helpful. Ramon Vasquez, he's a bench coach with the Boston Red Sox, very, very helpful. You know, I had a lot of guys that really helped me throughout the way. American guys, Clayton McCullough was one of my favorite managers as a player, and he's definitely one of the guys he's a first base coach for the Dodgers. And the way he handled things, the way he talked to guys, I mean, I kind of try to emulate what he did with me over there.
Well, having grown up around the major league, in and around the major league game, and having so many people like that influence you, gives you what I've always called pedigree. I mean, you didn't have to be a manager because probably a lot of your youth was spent around so many guys who had such high baseball IQs that you couldn't help but sort of accumulate and accrue the kinds of attributes that you need not only to be an outstanding player, but what makes you an even better player, I've always thought, is that you're a manager on the field. So you probably, when you played, were kind of a quasi-manager as a player as well.
Yeah, most of the guys I played with or like I was with around when I was a player aren't surprised that I'm managing now. I didn't think I was going to manage ever. or be a coach at all. But the guys I played with said, yeah, that was kind of an obvious thing, I guess. Um, you know what? It's just things that the shortstop I grew up with was Derek Jeter. Like those guys were like the captain of the teams. They ran the team. Like the way the example they go about every aspect of the game. So that was like the example I grew up with. That's what the shortstop did, right? Like it was the guy who controlled the infield, the guy who controlled the tempo of the team. When things get tough, they look to him, kind of thing. But even watching the game, like wasn't even in the baseball field all the time. Like me and my dad would watch games on TV, and it was just conversations of like, hey, what do you think the shortstop's doing right now? What do you think he's doing right now? What would you think in this situation? At the time, I didn't really think anything of it, but we were basically going through film. Like, we were basically just going through scenarios of the game, like college football and NFL guys do, watching film all the time. And I was thinking now back, that was like very, very helpful at a young age. Just watching baseball in the game, like on TV with dad, and just kind of going through situations and kind of knowing what to do in each situation.
Well, I can really identify with that. My father played, managed, and I was surrounded. My house always had, professional players around, and I liken watching and learning the game by just watching with my father. And I love the informality that you imply when you were watching these games with your dad, because I didn't know I was breaking down film with my father, but I was. And I say that watching games with these guys was like listening to music with Mozart. It was just a different experience. There was kind of no emotion. They weren't fans. This was their craft. They were stewards of the game who cared deeply for the well-being of the game and thought there was a way to play and a way to pretty much do everything, from putting your spikes on to how you wore your glove to how you ran on and off the field. All of these things mattered to these guys. They cared passionately and deeply for the game. So I really can identify with that kind of traditional view of what the shortstop does, the quarterback on the field, if you will. And that's why I'm a little older than you are. I predate you, but people to me like Keith Hernandez literally was like a manager on the field. I don't know if I ever saw a player, and I was no Met fan, believe me. I don't know if I ever saw a player in retrospect that was more in the game than Keith Hernandez was. And Jeter certainly, Jeter to me is the seminal player of the late 20th century when it comes to that, just insanely in the game. The flip play is indicative of a guy who is just thinking on another level. That's not something that 9% of guys are even going to think about doing, yet he thinks, well, of course I'm going to be there, which is why you had such, not only your father in your home, but to watch Jeter in his prime go through that really, I think, served you very, very well.
No, yeah, it's, like thinking back now, like if you just pay attention to the game, it'll talk to you. She'll speak to you. It's little things that just like sometimes hard to explain, but it's a song that you've seen before, you've heard before. And you kind of just pay attention to the notes and what's going on. Like she'll speak to you. You just have to pay attention.
That's a great analogy. I use lots of music analogies because I think they are perfect in so many ways. Things like all the great tunes have already been written and everything's kind of derivative. Nothing's really new. You might have new delivery mechanisms and things are shinier, but in the end, the goal is the same and what you're trying to accomplish usually is the same. And I agree with you. If you watch enough, and that comes from, I had a conversation recently with someone where I can't believe, for all the games I've watched now, one of the most distinctive things about viewing a game is how little players watch and how much players are watching what's on a tablet. I like information. I want information, but like anything else, you could have too much of anything. And if the information is taking you away from watching the game, I think that's a conversation that people in development need to have. I don't think that's the goal of more information, is to now say that what's happening on the field doesn't matter.
I consider it a double-edged sword because obviously, I'm with the Houston Astros. We use information and data abundantly. It is part of who we are, is what we use. But you have to be careful, especially in development, that the players don't become dependent on it. You know, it's one of those things. If they become dependent on it, the instinct becomes killed away slowly. Uh, Sometimes I would purposefully not tell them anything, like give open end like questions just to kind of get them to think. Sometimes very sarcastic questions and be like, all right, like what's going on here, because you become very dependent. Um, like you said, we live in a day and age of short time information or very short term thinking, where we have a split of the at bat. For example, we have little segments and they can dissect every single thing of that little split clip, but it's only a piece of a puzzle if you really think about it. It's a very grand scheme of the things, like who's pitching, what's going on, the score, what's the history behind them too, what the guy knows about each other, like what's the approach of the hitter. There's so many things of that puzzle that people don't understand and you can't really read from that little clip, because we have a lot of people who are very, very talented in dissecting swings or dissecting the body, but sometimes it's not really what the body's doing. What's your mind telling you what to do? Because sometimes they're a little different.
No doubt, no doubt. I liken it to. I believe there's a big difference between being a swinger and being a hitter. The great ones hit. The guys who don't make it probably are obsessed with their swing, because the reality is you got to be a hitter and you got to be ready for anything, and you just don't know. Regardless of what the odds are that a guy's going to throw a breaking ball on a 2-2 pitch in this circumstance, that doesn't mean he's going to throw that 2-2 pitch. And what you don't want, and what you do see a great deal of more than I have ever seen, is fastball middle taken for strike three and you're out. And that has to be the result of you thinking there's no way I'm getting that pitch in this circumstance, so you're not ready, and now you're sitting in the dugout and you've just struck out. I think those are great analogies that you use, and I love hearing this, not only because I agree with you, because someone your age, a lot of people your age are didn't have the benefit of growing up with a major league father in a major league environment, are very one-dimensional now. They do believe, like a chef in the restaurant, that there's no amount of salt that's too much. And the data and the information, while a very important ingredient, very important, information is extremely important. It's not the only ingredient in the recipe. And in order for the dish to taste good, and in order for the player to be able to take this information and synthesize it and use it to the best of his ability and to the organization's, dosage and amount become really critical. How much. And I think that's kind of where I find a lot of bright people like yourself trying to negotiate in pro ball now.
Yeah, it's like everything. Things take time to adjust. We came from a data wave of development and whatnot, and there's some enormous benefits to it. We've seen breakthroughs, but we almost have a yearning for the old school. We have a yearning for the Yoda, if you will. Like I yearn for it all the time. Those are my because we have the information. You can read the data. You can read what's going on. There's not really much. It's black and white with the data. But sometimes there's certain things that with players or even fellow coaches that like I haven't experienced, or how to get the most out of the guy. And that's where I revert back to guys who have been there before, or guys who know how to respond to those situations. Because, I consider it almost human data. There's people who like have logged so much time and so much information. They have to have something useful there. They wouldn't be in the game for such a long time if it wasn't for that. I use the data. I really like. Don't get me wrong. Like we use it daily basis. It's part of our workday. Like it's a daily thing. But we also need the actual human experience and what's going on with the person.
I couldn't agree more. And when you say the human data, you're absolutely right. I call it the hot data. There's cold data and there's hot data. The cold data are numbers. Numbers are cold. and they are. Information is cold. It needs a context. Your ability to put it in a context and to make it usable is, in my opinion, the catalyst for that is your knowledge and experience with the human condition. You've logged all these, you've seen all these experiences, you've watched thousands and thousands of games and players react in certain circumstances. Ideally, what you want now is to capture that hot data. The hot data is the guy's heartbeat. What's he about? How do I give one guy a data and another guy data when they're two completely different people who are not going to take this data and synthesize it in identical ways? That, to me, is where the rubber meets the road. So just like the ingredients, look, you could give me all the ingredients in the world. I'm not going to prepare the dish as well as a guy who's been a master chef for 25 years at a great restaurant and has made this dish over and over and over again. He could do it with his eyes closed. Me, I'd be lucky to make something that was edible because I just don't have the experience, even though I have all the ingredients.
Oh, yeah. This reminds me of a book that actually Gansler told us to read. It was a very good one. Jason, from Rob Gray. And one of the examples was about, I believe it was a Russian blacksmith. And they try to compare two blacksmiths, a rookie guy who's just started, who really did a lot of technique work and whatnot, and a man who was there for ages. The man who was there for ages, like, didn't really know what he was doing, but he did the technique perfectly with so much smoothness and so much ease because he did so much. While the rookie was looking for perfection, it was very inconsistent with the goal. And you can use it for any aspect of the world, like accountants, baseball players, basketball players, gardeners, whatever it may be. People who've done it at repetition have been there, done that. It's almost like what's the clip? Your mind shuts down and just performs. Once you get to that mode, it's just like when you hit a baseball and sometimes you have no clue what you hit and you hit it perfectly. It's just like, I saw it, I hit it, I really don't know what I hit. Those are the best moments, and guys just kind of just shut down and just revert to their instinct.
I use this a lot. So Bill Evans is one of my favorite piano players ever. He was a genius, jazz, just incredible, one of the great masters of the 20th century. And Bill said, you need to learn perfect technique, spend hours and hours doing it, learn tunes, spend hours and hours doing it, and then forget it all. And now go play. And to me, that's so hip and inside and so universal. The last thing in the world I want my hitters doing is walk out of that on-deck circle thinking about calculating anything. I want them to be open to anything because you just don't know what's coming. It's not like, the ball's not sitting on a tee for you and you approach it and hit it in any direction you want. The pitcher and those 7 guys behind the pitcher have as much to do with your fate, maybe more, than you do. So you've got to really be open-minded and kind of, looking around and seeing what the circumstances are and ready for anything, and now perform. Because you could have all the information in the world. If you can't perform, it doesn't really matter. There are plenty of musicians out there that know as much about music as the greatest musicians in the world ever, but they can't perform. And I think what we're in is the performance business. So I think the key ingredient is, how do I get my players to perform? And that brings me to my next question for you, is that as a young manager in A-ball, I don't think people realize as much as they should how difficult that can be. You have players aspiring. It might be their first year. There's no more short season baseball, but it might be their first full season. And obviously everybody wants to make it to the big leagues. How do you balance kind of what a manager has to do, which is write out lineup cards, hopefully have as the goal maybe winning a championship, although we'll talk about that, and the development of the player? I mean, how do you strike that very difficult balance, especially when you don't have 12 coaches on your staff?
Oh, for sure, yeah. A lot of, at least in the level I had managed this past season, a lot of guys haven't gone through a full season. So they truly don't understand how long it is. The travel, the games, it gets very tiresome, mentally draining. And you try to guide them, but I kind of established very quickly, like, I will not baby you. I'm not gonna baby you. This is professional baseball. It's a very cutthroat industry.
Yes, it
Now,
is.
I will back you up when things get tough. I'm here for you. Like, things are very difficult in this industry, and the last thing they need is to be on an island alone when things get tough. They have to understand, to be in this industry, you need very thick skin. Now, you can develop this. This is one of those things that you can go through. Like, people who, it's like that carpenter who's been going for 20, 30 years. His hands are ready to go. He's good. A lot of things happen, but he's ready to go. But a lot of these guys haven't gone through it. I try not to give them everything on a platter. I try to let the season will teach them. The game will teach them. You have to have patience, because the game will humble you. The game will tell you. I consider the game female, and she will. Like, I'm Puerto Rican. A lot of things in Puerto Rico are very romanticized, and I follow it, like the music. She'll tell you what to do. The season will tell you. Like, just let her tell you. Let her tell you the song. Let her tell you the story. Guys will be very different at the end of the season. From the first of the season to the end of the season, they become very different. Sometimes in a positive way, sometimes in a negative way. It's very difficult to hide who you truly are in a full season, because it'll come out. The stress, the pressures. It's very difficult to hide the person, like, inside. So you kind of go through that, and the industry I'm in, guys have to make decisions very quickly. Guys get released, guys get promoted, demoted. But you have to keep trying to get the guy better, the player better, until you have no more time. It's the reality of it.
Yeah, I use the term baseball players are terminally ill. Your time is running out far faster than any of us want it to. You do not have any time. And you could go trusting the process all you want. The bottom line is this: if you don't put up results, you're gone. And that's just a business necessity. There's a new draft coming every year. There's a whole crop of players that are coming in. Organizations can't afford to spend great amounts of time on you, especially if you're not performing or not showing at least the promise of performance. I have to say this: when you use the female to describe baseball, I think that's fabulous. I think that's so innately wise of you, as you're obviously an old soul, and that's to your benefit. I have long maintained that one of the reasons why the Latin player has proliferated to such a disproportionate degree in the big leagues is because the Latin player isn't the American player tends to be hyper masculine. That's the American model of males, whereas I believe the Latin players invest and invite that kind of feminine side that we all have, that kind of expressive dancer kind of quality that so attracts us to so many of these great Latin players that have been around forever, now more than ever. So when you refer to the female in describing the game, I'm really hip to that, and I think that's such an astute observation and so articulately put. I've got to compliment you on that. I think you're really onto something. And I think being Puerto Rican, it's easier for you to say that, because for you it's kind of a matter of fact.
Yeah, I'm very, very white, but I am Puerto Rican, and but it's just the culture that I was brought up in. The way, like we spoke earlier, sometimes in ground balls they would put the boombox and put salsa in there, so you can dance
Right.
to the song, you dance to the rhythm, you dance to the ball. So you kind of maintain that rhythm to it. There's certain songs that they play consistently in the stadiums in winter ball. It's like they're old songs. You know it's hard to not to fall in love with it, right? Most of
It's
the
also hard. Innately, we are rhythmic. As living beings, our heart has to stay in a rhythm. When your heart gets out of rhythm, you're in trouble. So it's an innate thing that should be imbued in everyone. This vibe that happens at these Latin American ballparks, and that you could feel when you watch these great Latin players, is even though they might not be thinking about it, that's what's going on. There's that fabulous, mellifluous rhythm that they all seem to have, and that's why you have so many great middle infielders.
Yeah, it's funny. My dad, I feel like my dad, thinking about it now, had so many tidbits that if people would have listened, it hadn't made no sense, but it made so much sense to me. Like he would talk in sounds, like even hitting, he would call it like boom and ba, "Zoof," it's like stuff like that. It was just so bizarre. Even in the infield, he would just call like, bang bang. Like, it was always a song. There's always a rhythm to it, and for me, it made so much sense. But when I talked to some people, they're like, "What the hell are you talking about?" I was like, "I don't know." It made sense to me. Like it's the song of it. Uh, it's I don't know.
Joe, I say, as you get older, you're going to be recalling a lot more of what your father said and saying how much sense it made, because
Oh, for
that's
sure.
just the
Yeah.
nature of it. But that's an extremely soulful way to engage in an activity, in a game, or in anything that you're doing. You're talking about something that's really soulful. It's like those old blues musicians that couldn't read or write, but they could play some of the greatest music, soulful music that the world has ever known. They wouldn't be able to write it on the staff on note paper, but man, it came from a place that was very, very intimate, very, very soulful, and that's what you're talking about.
Oh, you know what? You remember that Michael Jordan documentary, The Last Dance?
Yeah,
There was a
yeah.
segment that had Dennis Rodman talking about rebounds, and he was very specific at talking about the sounds of the clinks, and that was one of my favorite parts of the whole documentary because I was like, oh my gosh, I relate to it because he's like, oh, clink, you're going this way, clink that way, clink. He was a master at that little specific thing that's most people could not describe scientifically or they could not prove, but it's like it's so true. It's like the ball, the hit, the when the ball hits the bat, by the sound of it, how well it was hit, what's going on. It's certain things that just like you can innately just already recall.
If I'm working with a hitter and he's struggling, and let's say we're just working on something, whatever it is, maybe he may not be struggling. We're just working on making him better, right? Especially a guy, some of the professional players that I work with. The minute I sense that he's getting frustrated, I say, okay, here's what you're going to do: make the ball make a great sound. That's what I want you. I don't want you to think about anything. Create a sound here. And all of a sudden, now that's like a soulful thing. That's like something innate. I'm not telling him about where his arm is, where his hands are, what flow, anything. There's nothing technical at all. But oh wow, I gotta take the bat, make it hit the ball, and create a sound. And almost always we break through a little bit and we get somewhere. It obviously there is no cure for anything, and nothing works and everything works. But the reality is when guys are more hip to those sort of innate soulful things that help you do something well, it can really free them up to be more expressive, which is what performance is. It's about being expressive, or the ability to be expressive.
Oh, completely agree. It's just kind of breaking through that like wall of like just mentally thinking about mechanics, thinking about certain things. Because there is a time and place for all these things.
No
There
doubt.
also is a time and place just to let your instinct take away. You know, I
Right.
remember when I was first, I played shortstop a lot in minor leagues, and then that Blue Jays asked me to play a bit more second base, and I was like, for sure, yeah. And I had no idea how to turn double plays. I was like, I was always out of whack, and I was always an athlete. I just didn't know the technique well enough. I was very fortunate that Robbie Alomar, who was just another mentor of mine, he told me to close my eyes. He told me to close my eyes and throw. And like I was throwing stuff all over the place, and then slowly you would hear the glove like start like hitting the glove with my eyes closed, and it was hard to understand, but now you had it. And he told me, well, he said back in the day it became out of necessity because they would break double plays and they would put me to left field. So sometimes I would throw with my eyes closed because I had to. But then it's like he said, in every base you would have to know where every single base is with their eyes closed and be able to throw remotely close with your eyes closed. And I to this day, I remember like, man, you would take ground balls and take your eyes closed and throw to first. So you just knew where everything was. You shut your brain down and just kind of let your body take over.
Yep, that's it. That's you are now learning innately. You're learning like a child learns. That's how children learn. I mean, they, you don't take a kid's mouth and form the words for him. He emulates what he sees and hears, and he makes it happen. And I love the idea of guys not seeing where they're throwing a ball to. I think that is a fabulous. I don't know the science of it, and I don't need to know, nor do I want to know, but I do know it has a place. It works. And I always like to say, everything works and nothing works because everything is about context. Because what works today may not work tomorrow, which is why this development process to guys like you, I'm sure, is so fascinating. That's why I find it fascinating because it's never the same. It may not be the same from inning to inning, let alone day to the next day. So you kind of constantly sort of recreate how it is you're going to get this player from point A to point B.
Oh yeah, and then you mix, at least in minor league baseball, you mix in guys from all sorts of nationalities. That certain words mean different things. You have guys from Atlanta, Georgia, and Washington State, and you have guys from Venezuela, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Mexico. You throw in a couple of Asian countries as well. That's a completely different culture as well. So they learn differently, right? So
No
all of
doubt.
these guys have different way of learning things. Were brought up a different way. It's just very fascinating that there's not really a right answer most of the times. It's just trying to figure it out
Right.
together.
It's kind of like I think it's analogous to being a manager. What's right today in the second inning may not be right tomorrow because the score might be 8-3 as opposed to 2-1, and the change you make in the sixth inning in a game today may not be the same that I make tomorrow because the context is completely different, and that's why good managerial skills are so valuable because I've always maintained that the game is basically won or lost in 4 or 5 spots. And if you win those spots, whether it's make the pitch, uh, execute the double play rather than just getting one, or keep that runner on second base by making a good throw, whatever it might be, when you return to the game and do a post-mortem, you're going to see it's more about handling those 4 or 5 or 6 spots than it is anything overall, if you will, or over like, we did hit the ball. Everybody hits the ball hard, but the reality is guys catch the ball. It's what you do. Like, and we talked about it, Verlander and that Castellanos at bat. I mean, in game 6, that's the World Series right there. That's literally the World Series hangs on that at bat. And Castellanos gets beat by Verlander. Winning that one hitter really changed everything in the fortunes of Verlander as a World Series pitcher. And of course, the Astros go on to win the World Series.
Yeah, I think it's a very known fact how difficult it is to hit. Right, it is very
Yeah.
difficult to hit. So
Well, I'll say this. Let me say this. It's not difficult to hit. It's difficult to hit a pitcher who's trying to get you out.
true, that's very true. Yeah,
It's difficult. Okay. I could get in the cage. You could get in the cage. I'll hit line drives all day long if you're throwing 35 miles an hour, belt high, and I don't think you're going to throw me a 97 mile an hour slider. Then hitting is really easy. What's hard is the pitcher. Go ahead.
when hitting is the difficult part in the game, there's so many controllables that you can control, and they're usually very boring. You know, most of the guys want to teach things that like are so fascinating or so breakthrough. They found the full switch,
Right.
but in reality, it's the boring that really does win
The
baseball games
tedious.
or get guys better. Making your routine out, outfielders
No
going to
doubt.
second base to maintain the runner at first, not overthrowing the cut, making sure you get the right feed, communication, just little things, making sure everybody's on par in the same spot, just little very boring things that people don't really pay attention to make a very big difference. It's like having an umpire. Umpires, if you notice he's there, then if you notice that he's not there, he's doing a good job. Same thing
He's
with
doing a good
defense.
job.
If a guy is playing defense and you barely even notice he's there, like he's a good defender. The best compliment I ever heard
Absolutely.
was like a coach telling me every time they hit a ground ball towards me, he didn't even check. He already put out in the scorecard. that I found that a very great compliment, because you say it's dependability. You just want to be dependable.
Or if I said to you, hey, Joe, man, you seem like you always get a good hop. Well, you're not getting a good hop. You're creating a good hop. So it always looks like that play is easier because you know how to make the play easier, how to create a hop so that you're not caught in between. That's a great compliment.
I find it hilarious, though, nowadays. A lot of defensive coaches and teachers, they teach constantly short hops. They teach guys to catch things in short hops, and it kind of bothers me.
I'm kind of so glad you brought that up. What I am starting to see, and I know it's very well intended, and some of the stuff I like, but what I am starting to see far too much of is balls that are in the middle of you. If the ball's in the middle of you, right, I don't know why I'm going that way to catch that ball. I mean, 99% of the time, and the stuff is not looking, if the drill doesn't resemble what I see good defenders doing, then I'm wondering why are we doing this drill?
We go back to the piece of the puzzle. So what they're trying to do is resemble the movement of the glove when the player is going towards the baseball, right?
Yes.
But then you aren't teaching your legs or your body to do it in regards of a hop. Because,
Correct.
like I said before, you are dancing with the ball. Every ground ball is very, very different. She'll tell you a different story. So whenever she
That's
gives
right.
you a good hop, it's almost have to make the most of it and get it in a nice hop. Sometimes you have to revert to your short hops. It's like those moments. It's like do or die, or like very difficult ones.
Yeah.
For sure, those you work on and whatnot. But you are looking for an easier hop for a reason. That's why you see a lot of guys in the big leagues. They tend to get the ball in mid-flight. It's not because
Right.
of chance. It's because they're looking for it. And any moment
Correct.
they're going looking for that hop, as soon as they get the hop, they'll make the most of it, because it's difficult to consistently catch a short hop.
My philosophy is you field with your feet, not with your glove. It's where your feet take you, make it easier or more difficult for you to field the ground ball. So I want to position myself. I want to get that's why defense is always it requires far more energy than offense in every sport, because the defender has to work really hard to get in a position to defend. He's got to get there. He's got to take his body and get it to the receiver, or get it to the guy who's dribbling against him, or get it to the ball. If you're just relying on your glove, you could basically get a short hop on every single ball if the only thing you're doing is trying to get the short hop.
We go back to, again, it's kind of hard to describe what defenders are looking for. You're going for it, and then all of a sudden, boom, you go get it. You can't really like dissect it too much because it happens organically.
Yes.
Well, you can't really force these things. If the ball's going so fast, it's bouncing so weirdly. If you force it, it's going to get on you. You just got to go.
Right.
You got to go with the flow and kind of like play with it.
Just don't get caught in between. Don't get caught in between. If you get caught in between, you're going to have a problem. Don't get caught on your heels. I don't want you on your heel. I want you moving towards the targets. And you're right. It is so dance-like because, if there's a run on first base, ball's hit to the shortstop, I'll tell you what I want you to do is I want you to get to the right of that ball as fast as you can so that you could go as hard as you can to the left so that your toss to the second base is a firm one, because the faster your body's going, the faster the ball is going. So that's a dance move. You've got to circle it, get around, and go back. You can only ascertain that by doing it over and over and over again. There's no amount of ground balls that's enough for a developing player, in my opinion.
I think one of the funniest ones, it was in regards of hitting, but I still use it for hitting.
Oh, there's a lot of humorous hitting philosophies out there, believe me.
Well, this one was more so like how you have to shut down your brain. And it was a part of a movie from Forgetting Sarah Marshall, that the guy's teaching him how to try to surf, and he's like, "All right, get on the surfboard. Okay, you're going too fast. Get off." Goes back. Okay, now you're going too slow. Okay, goes back on. Okay, now you're not doing anything. It's just so true. It's like if you depend so much on people telling you what to do, and you don't know how to do it yourself. And he's like, all right, screw it. We'll figure it out over there. It's the same way, man. Like, I can't tell you how to do things. I think people depend too much on verbal cues and telling
No
guys how
doubt.
to do it, and just instead of letting them put in the spot for them to learn how to do it themselves. I want players to not need me at all. I'm here as a reference. I'm here, but I don't need them to depend on me.
You have to have stolen that from me because I say that. I've been saying that forever. I want you to not, I want to be able to sit back and watch the game. You're so well prepared that there's nothing for me to do. That's the end game. And in a world where we talk so much, especially in baseball, and there are so many books, like the advice I give to young coaches is don't read any books. So, delay reading unless the book was written by Socrates or Melville or some classic, Shakespeare, Hemingway. Don't read the books because in a world where we are obsessed with raising players' self-esteem, the one thing we do the least of is allow them to be self-reliant. And the shortest distance to high self-esteem is self-reliance. If I could do something, it's like me with sometimes when I'm on a computer, I can't do something. Rather than ask somebody to do it, if I could figure it out myself, I feel great about myself.
Right?
Wow,
Yeah.
that's awesome. That's awesome. I don't need to rely on you. I don't need you to be my crutch. So if we want our players, and we do, we want self-reliant players. And I believe, and I want to ask you this really quickly. I believe that's something the Astros have hit upon. If you want players to have high self-esteem and be confident, well, then you got to trust that they'll get there on their own to some degree. Now, here's my question. I went to Game 4 at Yankee Stadium, and my impression of the game was very, very clear in that there was a different countenance between the two teams. The Astros just carried themselves differently than the Yankees did, and even if you didn't know anything about baseball, you would have thought the better team was the Astros because I believe the first taste is with the eyes. I think there's something to how players look when they're on the field. There just is. Can I define it? Probably not. Can I measure it? I know I can't, but I know it when I see it. And even though the Astros got down in that game, I never felt like the Yankees were going to win that game. And the Astros now have become the gold standard. They are. They've had a long-running history of success, a couple of World Series, and really they've taken a step up and past so many other teams, most other teams in the game today. What is it that you think the Astros do differently, if anything, than from other teams?
One thing that's very impressive with the batch of guys that we have is the ongoing work that they do. These guys are constantly working on their craft, constantly working on defense, hitting, everything. They're not complacent at all. They know that they have to work. And it's a very good influence to have for our minor leaguers. Guys see it in Double A, Triple A that the guys in the big leagues, it's August and they're still doing early work and they're still doing individual work by choice. They're telling the coaches, "Hey, we're doing this today. We're going out today. We're doing this." You know, it's common for a lot of guys in the big leagues to just kind of, I'm in the big leagues. I do what I want. I'm the guy. They're so talented and they revert to that. But when you have guys who are so talented, but they work like they want, like they aren't, it's a very special thing to have. As an organization, we just expect to try to win. We're trying to win, whether it be in minor leagues, big leagues, everything. We're just trying to get in a position that we can win ball games. Sometimes it's a slow burn. We understand that because we can't expect short-term gratification. You have to be patient, especially with players. But it's just a cultural thing that we're like, you may be better. The Yankees may be a better team. The Phillies may be a better team. Whoever may be, but you better come to play, kind of thing. You better come beat us. Because it doesn't matter between the lines. Everybody's equal.
There's a certain badassness, and it may be accidental. They may be accidentally badass, but that comes through. That comes through when you watch them. I'm sorry, because it's hard. Obviously, there's a lot of terrific players in baseball, and the teams are close. So what really separates them? Well, you got to watch. You got to really watch a lot and watch intently, and listen to yourself when you think. And I believe there's that kind of like, don't mess with us. Like, we're serious, and if you're not, that's fine, but we are. So you better bring your A game. You better bring your A game, because we're going to bring ours. And to the extent you could do that more than somebody else, well, then you're going to win at the margins, because it is really about the margins, because everybody's so close. The top 6 or 8 teams are going to be kind of close. So you're. Let me ask you, if you could, we're going to switch gears a little bit here. If you could, because you have such a Latin baseball pedigree, if you could migrate one quality that separates Latin baseball from American baseball and take it to American baseball, what would it be?
The joy. I see a lot of guys in the States. I've seen a lot of baseball in the States for high school when I was at the University of Houston. They take it a bit too serious. They don't enjoy it. It's not a lot of guys are working so hard to get recruited, working so hard to get drafted. They forget the fun and joy of the game. And it's, at least I can attest to Latin baseball. It's like, some people think that we don't really care because of the way we play, because there's a joy to it. You have to enjoy the game, enjoy the thrill of the competition. A lot of guys shy away from when things get hard, and it's almost like a cultural thing. Like, when things get hard, things are tough. That's when we want it. We want the challenge, because it gets very fun. A lot of people cannot withstand that pressure. They kind of shy away from it. They want comfort. At least here, tournaments become extremely intense at when you play 11, 12-year-old tournaments. Like, the stadiums are full. They're playing the music. They're playing the congas. The moms are singing. Packed house. You're 11 years old. That's how you grew up. Like, pressure is like, yo, you want this. You want the fun of, like, people are looking at your at bats. Like, they want you to fail, and the other side wants you to succeed. I think a lot of guys need to enjoy and revert back to, like, being a child playing. They get a little bit too serious playing sometimes.
Well, that's a great. I've always said, when it comes to comfort, comfort is for the infirmed. Okay. And I sometimes wish my players a lifetime of discomfort, because if you're uncomfortable, you're always seeking, you're always itching. You're waking up, chomping at the bit to do what you can today to be a better player than you were yesterday, and that requires you not being comfortable. Do you think that the reason the American player, in your estimation, doesn't look like he's having as much fun is because he spends such a preponderance of his time, more so than ever, something I simply can't relate to, because I'm a craftsman, and I believe that if you want to do something, you should be doing that thing all the time, that the American player spends more time than I could imagine in a cage. He is in a cage being instructed, and that's like his and then he plays some games, and then the second he can, once that season's over, it might be like September, he goes back indoors and either is either weightlifting or he's in a cage again.
Oh, for sure, yeah. There is definitely like an aspect to that. I can see that guys don't. I like guys playing every sport. To be honest with you, I like guys being just enjoying everything. I remember my dad when I was in high school. A couple of scouts wanted me just to play baseball, and they tried to convince him, and he was like, "Hell no." It's like, when are you ever going to be able to play these games competitively when you're older? Never. Play everything. Have fun. Enjoy. The other part of it too is, unfortunately, I think there's a lot of coaches and mentors out there who haven't really experienced or are open to learn the higher levels, and they act like they know everything, and they act so hard on these guys and so disciplined on these players that they think things are so serious and so disciplined, very military-esque for these 15, 14-year-olds. Instead of being very, like, not babying them, not saying that, just being compassionate and helping them, because these are young players. They're learning. You have to teach them. And at the end of the day, the players are a reflection of you. So if the players are
No
playing a
doubt.
certain way or they're not playing the aspect of you, it's a reflection of you. It's like if I send a
No,
guy up to high A and he has no idea how to do base running or he's an absolute mess in communication, it's a
that's on
reflection
you.
on me.
No
Correct.
doubt.
So a lot of guys, because a lot of people can be very good coaches who never played baseball in their life, but they are open and listen and hear to people who have. Because because there's not really a way. It's like the only avenue of playing that does not reflect to people who didn't is just people actually doing it. But you can learn. It's just some people are just maybe unwilling or think that they have to know it all to be able to coach, and not really. Then most of the time, I have no clue. It's just you have to be able to communicate with players.
Yeah, if you're going to be good at development, you need to check your ego at the door, because I like to think that I'm learning too. And the degree, I think you're touching on something that I talk about a lot. If you go on social media, the degree of certitude
Oh
that
gosh,
people
it's
have
insane.
to develop
I'm sorry, that
is
bothers
just.
me so much.
I mean, I might have massive imposter syndrome, but I don't have a half hour of certitude. I don't know if the choice I make along with a player to do something is the right one all the time, because I'm not choosing everything else. And maybe there's something out there that is better for the player, but we have to make a choice. So this certitude on steroids is insanity and not good for players.
Yeah, and I understand the hustle. I understand a lot of these social media avenues are a gateway or a resume to be able to expose themselves to different organizations. I understand the hustle to try to build their reputation, whether it be for lessons or cages or teams. I understand it. Don't get me wrong. They do what you got to do, but sometimes it hurts players. It really does, because you can't really fake your way too much. At the end of the day, you are going to get exposed. The same way I said the players get exposed during a season, coaches get exposed all the time during a full season, and players can sniff it out. They know who's not genuine. They know who does not know what they're talking
Absolutely.
about. It's very hard to hide.
Absolutely. Don't ever underestimate the intelligence and the for lack of a better word, the bullshitometer of your players, regardless of how old they are, how experienced they are. Players will shake their head and nod agreeably, and that does not mean that they're buying in. That just means they understand how to get along. Listen, I know you're pressed for time. You probably got to go do some early work, throw BP, hit some fungos, whatever it is that you're doing. I kind of knew how smart you were, but I must say I'm very impressed at your stage of the game with your incredibly high baseball IQ, and this is something that I enjoy doing more than anything else. Is the rare occasion to sit and have an audience with someone who's really really bright and knows so much about the game. I'd love for you to come back. You have an open invitation anytime you want. You text me, tell me, Tommy, listen, I got something I want to talk about. You're welcome on the conversation at any time.
For sure, Tommy. And I like to finish it with of all the IQ and all the baseball acumen I've able to accumulate is because of the people I've been around to. The people I have as a coach, as players, it's almost just an accumulation of the index book of people I'm around. And people can accumulate it as well. You just have to be open and look. There's so many good baseball minds out there. You have to be open and listen. You have to humble yourself and just listen to them, because you could very well be wrong, or something could be done better. So just open your eyes, hear, listen to people, and you can learn a lot.
Well, the last thing I'll leave you with is that's one of the first music lessons I ever got, and I learned music as an adult, so I had no clue as to what I was doing was, and I didn't understand it for a long time. It's more important to listen than it is to play. And I was like, wow. But it's the same, just exactly what you're talking about right here. That's very sage advice for people. Is you need to open your ears and shut your mouth sometimes, and good things will come to you. So, Joe Thon, can't thank you enough. Open invitation on the conversation anytime. I want to thank you. Just super. Good luck the rest of the way. Travel safe, and I'll see you down the road.
All right, Tommy, thank you, my man.
And Joe Thon.